Hello and welcome to the Mission TV show. Today we've got a show with some missionaries that have been in the field for a while, then they were home for a while, still working for missions, and it looks like they're heading back soon. Before we start our interview, though, let's go to one of their favorite texts, and that is in Philippians chapter 4, and beginning in the middle of verse 11. For I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. I have John with me on the show, and we'd like to welcome DJ and Jodi Knott. Welcome.
Thank you.
And before we go too far, Jodi, you said you wanted to say something specifically about this text. You've personalized it in a way.
Well, that we're learning to be content.
Learning to be content.
Especially in verse 4 where it says rejoice, always rejoice. Second, rejoicing.
That can be difficult in trial, can't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
But learning to do that is the goal, right?
Right.
So it's a learning process? It doesn't just happen?
Definitely a learning process.
Not just automatic. Some people are just created happy.
I don't know, maybe.
But that hasn't been your experience yet.
I think we were created happy. I think that the things of this world sometimes ensnare us and tangle us down and take that joy from us. But I think that ultimately to find that joy again and to realize the fullness of that joy once we're in heaven in the presence of God, that will be the greatest joy.
Wow. Well, I know you have some pictures to share with us, but before we get into that, I'd like to ask kind of a brief history of how you got into missions. Since this is the first time we've been able to get you to, to a time when we could actually record your story.
I don't know, for me, giving to missions was just part of how I was brought up, and it was just part of life from a very young age. But I got to a point in the middle of college where I realized I had never asked God if what He wanted with my life. Like I gave my money, but that was good enough somehow in my mind, and so that kind of struck me that I had never asked Him, and then I started becoming afraid that all the things I had worked for were maybe the wrong things, and how was He going to use these things now that I've been learning all while I grew up.
What was your major at that time?
Aviation.
Okay.
And I thought, boy, how can God use that? Hopefully the character development of all this training has been worth the time, because what else will it be worth? And David Gates came recruiting at Andrews, and suddenly, like, my world opened up again. I thought, maybe there's a way God will use this.
So the skills you were acquiring, you thought were wasted, but then you started to see that perhaps there was a place for those skills in God's work.
Yeah, and I just encourage people to really ask God what He wants with their stuff and also with themselves. I had never asked what He wanted with me. I had my plans and goals, and I knew what I was going to do, and then I was like, wait a minute. If I'm a Christian, maybe there's more that's required.
Weren't you afraid to ask?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So you might take
Still
it away.
am sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, He tends to challenge us, doesn't He?
Yeah.
So
I grew up as a missionary kid, and my grandparents and my great-grandparents and my parents were all missionaries too, so kind of runs in my genes and in my blood, and I really enjoyed my growing up experience out in the mission field. And so I had on my bucket list to be a student missionary, and so I did that in the middle of college. Went to Central America, to Honduras for a year, and that was a really great experience, but then I didn't really know what I wanted to do after I finished school, and so then DJ went to Bolivia as a student missionary after he finished college, and I was still in school, and so he came back from that experience, and we were just about to get married, and he's like, I just want to go back, I just want to go back. I was like, well, hold on, I have to finish school first, and he didn't want to wait for me, but it was good. He did wait for me.
I seem to remember some some whispers about that time about DJ going back and getting married and everybody going like, oh, I hope it's not one of those situations where she won't go with him, you know. So we were all very happy when she went with him.
Well, the need is so great out there. Once you've been out there, it's hard to see people go home because you're like, we need you, we need you. And the people down there feel that way, you know, anytime somebody leaves, and when I left it was the same, like, hey, you're doing something, you're involved, why are you going home? And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to. I'm not sure what God has for me next, but...
And that was to go home hard. And get her?
Yeah, that's what it turned out to be.
Well, so that's good though. It's good to have a partnership in the mission.
Yeah, you're stronger. So then when was that? I mean, how long ago?
That was 2009.
Okay.
I came back and I worked for a year and a half at Andrews University while she was finishing up, and it turned out that the work I got to do was incredible experience for what I was going to do in the future. And by the end of that year and a half, I could look back and say, I know why God brought me back. He had a plan. You know, sometimes he calls us to do more training and things like that. And when I left Bolivia, I was like, I have no idea, God, why you're sending me back to the States. But, you know, sometimes we just have to trust, and then we get to see eventually.
That's great.
So when you were in the mission field, it seemed to you like there was a great need in the mission field for missionaries. And people thought of America as already having quite a few resources.
Yes.
Spiritual resources.
Yeah, and I got to see that out there. You know, people would tell me, well, there's work to do back home in the States. Absolutely, absolutely, it's all around us. But what I would reply is there's a lot of people that do it too. There's just not many people going out. Out to foreign lands, so.
So they say that 92% of all Christian giving goes to minister to the 7% that speak English.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's pretty crazy.
So going back to Bolivia, so you talked to, you know, you guys were getting married, and then how soon after you got married did you go to Bolivia? Was that a hard decision to go to Bolivia together?
We did a lot of praying about it. We studied some workbooks about knowing God's will, and I became sure that we needed to go back before she did, and I didn't say anything because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to just influence her in a way that God wasn't leading. So I waited and prayed that God would show her too if it was His will, and eventually He did, and we talked about it. And
yeah, so we went really back in the beginning of 2011, January. So
and what did you do there first?
Well, that's where the pictures come in mind. There's Bolivia in the pink.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can go. We built a house for the missionary base, for the aviation base that was just getting started. We didn't do it ourselves. We helped.
We helped, yeah.
We learned a lot.
That's a lot of work.
So that was a few months project, and
So you didn't just fly in the mission
No,
field?
in fact, when we were there, the planes in Bolivia were, they were trying to import them into the country, and they were kind of in a customs lock. And the customs lock was on for several years. We're grateful because it was just released, all the paperwork and everything was finished this last November. So a few months ago, and that's why we're actually headed back to Bolivia here next month in order to go help get those planes back running and useful again.
Because sitting for so long isn't good for airplanes.
No.
It isn't good for people either.
No, that's true. That's true.
So you're more than a pilot. You also do mechanic.
Yeah, that was that year and a half at Andrews was in the shop there, and I had gone through the course to be a mechanic, but then the year and a half was experience, and I really needed it. That's pretty much what we've done since then. I mean. That's been needed.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. After we had been in Bolivia a few months, we were praying. There was some help needed in Guyana because the mechanic, there was no mechanic in the country, just a pilot, and there was an airplane that needed some work. So we were praying about it, and we just didn't feel it until one day. I was having my devotions, and it was so clear. God was like, time to go to Guyana. And within 10 days, we were in Guyana. And no, we left Bolivia, and it took another week to get there. But
you go by donkey?
No, but you had to go all the way across Brazil.
through a bunch of different places. But God was so good. And so we got to Guyana and worked on an airplane.
Yeah, that was a few weeks. And
a mall?
Yeah, it was stuck out 200 miles in the jungle, no road access at all, and had some problems. So that was our chief pilot, actually, Gary Roberts, came over from Africa, and we helped him and got it going and flew it out. So that was a success, fun project.
Cool.
Yeah, so then we were in Guyana, so we just stayed in Guyana instead of going right back to Bolivia because there was still no mechanic there for the plane that was functioning and operating for the missionaries. So we ended up working on that plane and a lot of other projects like the van and the hospital ambulance and another little plane that was sitting there and all kinds of stuff, you know, and mechanical work and maintenance is just really important, even if you're not in that particularly.
It's hard to convince people to go to the mission field just to work on broken stuff, you know. Most people don't have that vision, and so there's usually a lack, and it's good to be flexible and just be willing to do whatever God puts in front of you.
So you just raised an important point there, and that is that there's need for all sorts of things that we don't necessarily consider.
Absolutely.
So
all skill sets.
I hear some people say, I don't want to be a missionary because I'm afraid to preach.
Yeah, well, then I wouldn't be one. But there's just so much need, and it takes a lot to run a mission project, a lot of different skills.
And to do it well and keep it working, you need maintenance and all sorts of things.
So do you feel God's presence when you're working on an airplane engine?
Yeah. I mean, there's an interesting thing about working on stuff in the mission field. You never have a manual or anything, so there's a lot of prayer involved. Like, God, I don't know what I'm doing, but like, this is an engine. I learned about this in school. It's got to be somewhat similar to something I've seen before. And you know, another neat thing is that it's great to be able to pick up the phone and call the U.S. and call people you've met here that are willing to help, even if they can't get away. They're willing to be there on the other end of the phone, and that ambulance was one of them. I picked up the phone and called the guy, and he knew exactly what the problem was. I didn't know. I was just making some bad sounds. So he told me what to do, and it's just really great to have that support. People can really be a blessing that way.
Support the ones on the front line.
So we were in Georgetown there in Guyana for several months, and we decided that we would like to move out of the city because it's not really our favorite place to go. So we moved out to this little village called Bethany, out in the middle of the jungle. Picture up at the top you can see is they built a mission school for health evangelism training, but also right on the outside the picture is the air base, which is just a house and the frame of a hangar, but in a little bit of a runway. So it needed some work, so we decided we needed to go and move out of the city and start getting that ready. So that's what we did. And here's another picture too.
That's your mechanic shop?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see.
And you brought that airplane from the city that you were working on there?
The other pilot was based in the city, and so he would fly from the city while we were working like on the house and the hangar. But if it needed maintenance, he would fly it out there, and we'd work on it there.
Okay.
It's just a lot nicer. There's a roof, and when you're out in the international airport, there's a lot of traffic, airplane traffic, and noise, and the sun, and
yeah,
everything.
If you don't have a hangar to work under, that can be really.
This is like luxury for the mission field.
Yeah. Wow.
So, just some more.
It looks like you're rebuilding a plane.
It needed quite a bit of work. It had served a lot of hours. So.
Wow. Let you talk about this.
Oh, this was the runway. This place was amazing. Previous missionaries had started this and put a lot of investment into it, and then they had just run out of personnel to keep moving forward on it and get it finished. They were down to one family basically running the aviation, and so we went out there and just needed a lot of help. The jungle needed to be cleared back. The runway was all eroded and rough, and so we had to plow it up and repack it, and so kept us busy for a while.
I see you out there with a machete.
Yep. Yeah, you can see in the bottom picture down here, all the area that was cleared on the sides, that was all, you know, growing up. The jungle grows really fast.
Really?
Yeah, it was 30 feet tall when
I
we
think
got
there's
there.
a tree that grows an inch a day.
Wow.
That's my opinion. Like when it's young. I think when it gets a little bigger, it doesn't grow as fast, but when it's really small.
Do you have banana trees there and everything?
A few. Mm-hmm.
I've seen those things grow like, you know,
Fast.
we plowed one place in Thailand and I came back 3 months later and there was a tree there.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't remember that tree.
Yeah.
It wasn't there.
So this was just a case of needing more help, and actually the church, the local village church came out and helped us clear that. We didn't do it all ourselves.
Wow.
It was nice to have extra hands.
Yeah, well, the villagers, it seems like some places, you know, they know the benefit, and so they're willing to help.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Guyana, the Adventists there have actually had, they've had Christianity for many years, but there's been Adventists in the country for over 100 years. And that village near the mission school there is majority Adventist, and the people were just really wonderful, all of them.
Isn't that interesting how when one person starts a project, it kind of attracts others and they get involved with God's work and get a blessing also? I like
neat.
that, yeah.
So we were there, and we would love to still be there, continue working. The house isn't finished, the runway's not quite finished, and yet God brought us back to the States about 1.5 years ago, and had us working here on Airplanes for the Mission, still doing the volunteer work, but just a really good experience. I'm trying to do a little bit more fleet standardization, and I'm a teacher, but I've been doing a lot of work on airplanes, and it's been good for my character, like really good. And we had a lot of different airplanes come through the shop in the last 1.5 years, and yeah, it's pretty much empty now. So
you're working here in Collegedale on what? On a you said fleet standardization. What is that?
There's like for you guys here working on the set, it would be like having a different camera at each location, and then trying to get them all to work together, and then you're like, oh, I need a battery for this one. Oh, but that one's battery is charged, but not this one's battery. So just getting them all the same, and being able to not have to work on them so much in the field, being able to send them well prepared with the same equipment. Having one spare part for the 3 airplanes that are operating in a country or something like that. So you don't have to stock extra. It's actually really efficient.
Yeah, yeah.
Time-wise and monetarily.
So you've been working here in Collegedale on those airplanes. How many airplanes were there?
I don't even remember.
There were probably...
We've probably worked on about 9 in the last 1.5 years.
9?
Something like that.
Wow.
Quite a few.
Some of them have gone to the field, and some of them have been sold because they didn't match.
Yeah, trying to get the fleet to match. And we came back with the idea of getting a plane, the one you see in the top right and lower left picture, and taking it right back to Guyana to help the pilot that was there. His plane was wearing out, and
that's a Cessna 172?
It's a 182.
182, okay.
Yeah, and that's the kind we're trying to make our standard plane. But that didn't end up working out in the time frame we had hoped, and we got to the end of that, and we had to ask, okay, God, what's next? And I just felt like He was telling us, look around, there's plenty of work. And sure enough, there were planes sitting there in the shop, and I was like, I had been saying I'm not working on anything that's not going in the mission field, but it turns out that it's been a real blessing for us, and we've been able to help the program move forward and transition some of those planes that weren't being used into planes that will be used, and so it's been
excellent.
It's been good.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so kind of from here, we're looking to go back to Bolivia, where they have 3 airplanes that have been sitting, like we were saying, and get them working. But our goal from the very beginning was we had like something on our heart that was pulling us towards the highlands of Bolivia, up near La Paz and Lake Titicaca, but more out of the city, like from there going out. And so, I don't know, this is just a person from there, and it's high desert country, and there were missionaries back in the early 1900s, Adventist church missionaries, but there hasn't really been any missionaries, at least not American missionaries, there working working the projects. There are a few little schools that are just trying to hang on, and we could really use to open up work up there. The literacy rate is like 50%, and
Wow.
I think that, I don't know, it's just been something that's been tugging on our hearts.
So how many people groups and what kind of area? You're talking about 100 square miles or?
I'm not exactly sure. It's a pretty big area up there. The Andes Mountains split around the lake. Most people are familiar with the Peruvian side and have visited the lake from the Peruvian side, but we were looking at the Bolivian side. We've actually never been there.
Really?
We went and helped out in the lowlands, and we never made it up to see what the needs and opportunities were, so we're really excited about that.
Is that like the Altiplano?
Yeah, Altiplano.
That's like the world's driest place, the driest place on the entire
I
planet.
don't know about that, but
It's pretty dry.
yeah,
It's
I
pretty
think the
dry.
desert on the, like Chile, on the coast there's a really dry desert, the Atacama Desert over there. And this is pretty dry too. And people are poor, a lot of them out in the outlying areas.
Which is probably one of the reasons for the literacy rate being 50%.
So we're really excited to go there, see what the needs and opportunities are, see if we can use the airplanes as an opening wedge to bring the gospel into villages, hopefully plant Bible workers eventually, and through medical work. And
Nice.
excited
Bible
about
workers
that.
and school teachers and
Yes.
medical work and
So
There's even an empty clinic up there that the government uses maybe a week or two every year, and it's empty and it's sitting up there. And so, like, we're hoping to find some medical personnel to join us and go up there and open that clinic, because there's something very powerful in not just doing a medical evacuation with the airplane, but also being able to minister to the people once they arrive, either at the hospital to visit them or at a clinic that is like your own, so to speak, your own, and being able to show them Jesus
Right,
that
in
way,
practical
because
ways.
you know, Jesus, when he ministered to people, he not only looked at their physical maladies, but at their spiritual troubles too. And so he was trying to minister to both of those. So that's kind of something to always keep in mind for us.
yeah, and if you could access that clinic most of the year, I mean, people would know that it was there and it was open and it was available, and that would be a big drawing card too, because then they could get the smaller needs, whatever, taken care of there, and then you'd always have the airplane if they needed more help. So I'm sure that that would bring people to
Yeah.
witness to. You wouldn't have to go looking.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's our hope.
So has Becky had any influence on this?
Yeah,
project?
she's been working on a program to get Bibles for
Bibles
these
up there.
villages. Yeah, she grew up. Some of her childhood was spent up there, and
So does it take a special airplane to fly that high?
it does. Yes,
We're talking
So-
over 10,000, right?
So you're
Very high.
adapting one of the 182s, or
Well,
you have to get a different plane?
That was an interesting story. I'll try to keep it in a nutshell. But when I was a student missionary, our chief pilot was looking for an airplane for Africa, and he went to see an airplane. It was misadvertised. It wasn't what he was looking for. It was a turbocharged 182. And the dealer was so embarrassed that he said, just make me an offer. And Gary said, I don't want the airplane. And he offered him about a third of what it was worth. And the dealer said, it's yours.
Wow.
And so Gary called up Jeff down there and said, hey, can you use this plane? And Jeff and Fawn and I were praying, and in the morning we all had a strong conviction that God needed that plane in Bolivia. So it's there now, it's imported, and
Wow.
it seems to be the perfect plane for the job, and God provided in a miraculous way.
Praise the Lord. So the airplane just multiplies your influence. You
It
can
does.
go
It's
more
a force
places.
multiplier, yeah.
Okay.
I got to see that as a student missionary. You could just, if you have people, the airplane can just spread their influence far and wide.
Wow, praise
So
the Lord.
there's need for planes, but there's need for people.
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
So there's need, a lot of need down there where you guys are
Absolutely.
working.
Yeah.
So maintenance people and teachers and
Yeah.
Bible workers and
And if you have
Medical.
something that you're like, oh, well, I don't know if this can be used in the mission field, this is some training that I have or experience, it probably can. We can find somewhere to use it. 'Cause
if not, it's a stepping stone to what God wants to teach you in the mission field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because so many times, I mean, like you didn't learn how to work on airplanes, you were a teacher, right? So you've had to learn all of this thanks to
But the teaching teaches you organization ability, which I'm sure
Right.
your husband appreciates.
And God's going to use it. You know, God wouldn't have led you there if he wasn't going to use it. But he does expand our skills as he sees fit for what he needs us to do right then. And so
that's one of the things I love about working for God, because he utilizes all parts of you, of your skills, so you don't feel like
and he stretches
wasted
you.
anything.
Yeah,
It's helpful. Go ahead.
Oh, and then I was going to say, then he gives you like spiritual gifts, which are even more abundant in the areas that you need them.
Right.
It's really helpful to be willing to do anything, though, when you go, even if you have a certain skill set. And that's something that we've seen over and over again. If you're willing to do anything, God will use you.
So it's that willingness.
Yeah.
And the desire that the Lord places in your heart. A burden for others. Yeah.
And going back to the verse 13 is the one we always hear. And you know, God using us and preparing us, but also enabling us, because we can do all things. Everything we've never done before, we can do through him if he needs us to, you know, because he's the one that gives us that ability and strength.
So
I was just going to say that I saw this bulletin board, or like right by a church, and it said, "Gospel begins with go." And I think that we as Christians need to go, whether it be overseas for what we call a midterm mission opportunity, like maybe 3 months to a year. Get your feet wet, see the need out there. Or if you're going to stay here in the States, we really just encourage people to go and do things that are outside of their comfort zone, like colporteur work or door-to-door ministry, Bible studies, one-on-one with people, because people are the focus. But just want to encourage people to go, just like the gospel commissions us to do.
Yeah, I found out just recently that there's a whole southeast corner of Arkansas that has no Adventist presence at all.
Really?
So there's a mission field.
Yeah, there's a lot of work.
There's a lot of work right here, and there's a lot of people to do it.
Right.
So that's good.
That's the key
Lord.
is to go do it.
Yeah,
Yes.
to do it.
Yes.
Put
And
that
that's
primary.
Yeah, that's what we try to encourage people to do. Well, I just appreciate you so much sharing with us the burdens on your heart and what you've learned and seen in the mission field. And the time has passed already. And so I just want to thank our viewers for joining us also for this episode of Mission TV Show. And I want to encourage you to do like DJ did and ask the Lord what you should be doing with your life. Because he has a plan and he has a place for you in his work. And it might be where you think it is and it might not be. But he will enable you and he will strengthen you and give you the ability to do exactly what he wants you to do, where he wants you to do it. May God bless you until we see you again on the Mission TV Show.